Fraktur is generally written at 6 nib widths, so keep the nib parallel to the baseline. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're just going to look at some basic Fraktur. You could add a little curve of a fishtailing there in the opposite direction. And you can extend out and up and back through. 1, 2, press and out and back and up and in and through and out. And you could make it a little bit more oval shaped. So this is quite a narrow oval that's more circular. And again, through and back and out. The H I really love because it's such a complicated letter. But the purpose of this video is to show you what happens to Fraktur when you try writing it with a pointed flexible nib. So I'm still using the same basic movements with some adjustments to shape. And of course, you really get a sense of movement with the pointed flexible nib in an oblique holder. So I'm going to double up the strokes now. And you can either come down and add a little hairline tendril. So I'm going to do that on the second one. And you can see the sort of sympathy between this angle and this angle. Or rather this line and this line, because the angles are all the same. So if we look at this, and we look at this, and we look at this, and you know, the tool does limit you somewhat, so you do have to adjust the structure of the shapes a little bit. And of course, look at the similarity between the U and the A. Of course, I'm not going to put a crossbar in the U. The X is really difficult because it's quite a constructed shape. And I make the Z with a little bit of a flourish for a number of reasons, which I'll look at in a second. So of course, next we look at the minuscule. And, you know, like Fraktur with a broad edge nib. So I use something called a trick. So I'm also using my own specific hold, which I call the PA Scribe hold or PA Scribe tool hold, which is a much higher hold, so it gives me a little bit more room to play with. And you can either come up and down, or you can do this G, which is also reminiscent of Batard. So let's look at the minuscules. And like the A, you know, you want to sort of come down and around. And again, that problem with the X. So I think one of the things to be careful of when you're doing this kind of pointed pen Fraktur is to keep the shape quite sharp. So you can do this and this and that and that, this and that and that and that, rather than this. Because this is more of a sort of semi-textualis construct. Now, I've left some space at the top because I wanted to show you one other thing with this type of Fraktur. So this type of Fraktur allows us to do some really interesting flourishing if we're using muscular movement and whole arm movement. So we have a real sense of how the broad edge Fraktur works with the pointed pen Fraktur to give us a much better, a much more interesting approach to the writing of the script.